Welcome to the Last Life Ever podcast. I am one of your hosts, Jillian Sidoti. My co-host is Jeffrey Holst. Jeff, who do we have on the show today?
Well, the two of us. Oh, you mean who's our guest? Yes. So our guest today is actually a friend of mine. His name is Ariel Siegelman. And Ariel, actually, we had his wife on recently, so maybe you've seen that episode, Cecilia Cortez. And the two of them are some of the most amazing people I've had the honor of meeting in the last several months. I've known Ariel for, which is about 3 or 4 months now, so it's not super long, but we've spent time traveling internationally together. We've become fast friends very quickly. He is I don't even know how to explain how amazing he is. He's a security expert, right? So he has extensive operational and management experience dealing with things like international security projects. He's a Israeli government certified tactical instructor. I mean, that's some hardcore stuff. And I don't want to blow the surprise, but he is literally if I needed someone to protect me, this is who I would go to. And
Ooh.
You know what? I probably
All right,
do.
We'll be back with Ariel in just a moment.
Help me, my brother, can you lend me a hand as I walk through this land of confusion? If we give to each other, then there's nothing to take. Let's live life for the moment before it slips away.
Ariel, thank you for being here, my friend. It's so good to see you again.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, and I wasn't kidding, by the way. If I was going to hire someone for security, it would definitely be you. And I said if I needed someone, and I know what you were thinking. You were like, you do need somebody. Everyone needs somebody.
Yeah, you hire me now.
Okay, wait a minute, Ariel. So Jeff kind of told me before you came on the program about what you do and what you're all about, and that you teach, all governments even how to be more secure. But I want to know, what should just regular old folks like myself be doing? What are some of the steps we should be taking to keep our families more secure? I feel pretty secure, and we do not take security very seriously around these parts, unfortunately, and I probably should take it a little more seriously. But what should we do? What are things we can do to be more vigilant?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think that, I could sit here and tell you some ideas about different kinds of equipment, or maybe oh yeah, go get some training, learn how to shoot a gun, something like that. I don't know. There's a ton of things you could do, but ultimately, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that, you feel pretty safe. On one hand, I don't try to tell people to walk around feeling afraid. But I think that it's really important to kind of accept the fact that the world has risks. It's risky to wake up in the morning. It's risky to get out of bed. And that's okay, because there's things you can do to control those risks. And you probably do a lot of things every day that are somewhat risky, like driving a car. But you control those risks by being aware of what they are and knowing how to deal with them. So likewise, there are other risks that thankfully in America, we kind of sometimes can forget that, sometimes there's people who have bad intentions toward you. Just having a mindset knowing that oh yeah, there could be someone who intends to do me harm. What are some of the realistic scenarios that could occur? What are some of the realistic things that somebody might try to do to hurt who I am, my family, take something from me? And what can I do to just be a little bit more aware and make sure that those kind of things can't happen. So I always go back to mindset.
Okay. So, well, I mean, I'll just give you a perfect example. We have a fence around my house. Well, nope, that's not true. We don't have a fence around my house. I have a fence of one part of my house, you could easily just like walk around it.
I actually have walked around your fence, Jillian.
Yes. So that's not very secure. I have cameras. We never watch them. Ever.
I'm not sure you should be advertising this. Maybe the starting point is not telling people you're not watching your cameras.
Right. Another part is, but it's on a DVR, so if I had to go back and watch it, I could. I have a huge gun safe, though. No,
you could throw that at somebody.
Yeah, I could. No, because it's a huge gun safe. It's very heavy, but it only holds real guns, and those real guns are called guitars.
Jeff again is like, don't tell people this.
Yeah, no, I have a huge gun safe, and it's just chock full of guns. Oh, yeah, that's what I keep.
I have 4 dogs.
That's real security.
So let's use your scenario, just some of the things that you've mentioned, and we can talk about security from that perspective. Any of those things are valuable items in a security program for your home.
Okay.
But I think that it's important to remember, like, you start with having a mindset that, like, yeah, something bad could happen. Okay, well, what is it in my home that I want to protect against? Probably you want people to feel welcome to come to your home, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So on one hand, I don't know very many people who want to have a home that feels like a fortress. I know a lot of people who have a home that they want to feel like it's a home and it's a welcoming environment and it's full of love and care and everything else. However, I know you want me to feel welcome to come into your home if you invite me.
Right.
But that's the key thing, is that you want to know that if you didn't invite me, that I don't necessarily feel welcome to be there, that you could stop me from coming in if you don't want me to come in. And if I did come in, that you have an ability to get me out of your home. So security doesn't have to be something that's like unhospitable or unwelcoming. It just has to be something that's kind of realistic about, like, oh yeah, I have control over my home. I don't allow the goodwill of other people to be the determining factor in my security.
Mm-hmm. So, like, let's just say, for example, my husband is constantly saying he wants to get a gun. I don't. What is like an alternative for, if somebody shows up in the middle of the night? Like, should we buy bear spray, for example, or a baseball bat? Like, what is something we should be having on hand at all times?
So I'm gonna frustrate you with my answer maybe a little bit.
Get the gun?
No, and I won't say that because I try to shy away from telling people what they should and shouldn't do. But let's just talk about it from a mindset perspective. Let's talk about it from a scientific perspective. Mm-hmm. Guns, I think that when people are afraid of guns, what they're really afraid of is kind of the risk that a gun poses. Mm-hmm. And so a gun is a tool that is a risky tool. There's you have to be really safe with a gun. And if you don't know how to use a gun, then it inherently has more risk. Kind of like if I was driving a car and I didn't know how to drive, I would probably be a pretty risky driver. So what I think you're really looking for is, it's not about, should I get a gun, should I not get a gun? It's really about, what can I do to effectively create a response capability within my own home. In other words, if somebody came in and intended to do me and my family harm, what item would pose me the greatest asset, or what items would give me the greatest ability to control that situation and make sure that I can protect my family? Mm. So I think when you look at it that way, then you can start to line things up on the table, so to speak, and be like, well, I've got a kitchen knife. I guess I could go take lessons in, like, Filipino knife fighting. I've got, I could go to the gym and learn jujitsu. I could learn boxing. I could learn, make myself into a more knowledgeable creature that in and of itself means that I'm the tool. A gun is another item. Ultimately, I think that when you're a human who has more capabilities, I think all those things are viable and valuable things to know. And so the more knowledge and skills that you have, really you see yourself as the weapon, and it doesn't matter whether it's bear spray or a gun or a knife or a baseball bat. Ultimately, you are the weapon.
Okay. So what are, okay. No, this is fascinating to me because, and it's just weird because I saw a TikTok this morning of a guy in Seattle who had his house home invaded and he was on the phone. It was a 911 call, right? And it was a 911 call and he was hiding in his bedroom and he ended up shooting the intruder. So I'm always curious as to, those are things that you never think you're going to happen to you and then they do. So what are the things that we all should be doing to protect ourselves better?
So after you've kind of accepted the fact that like those are things that really could happen, and again, I'm not advocating for anybody to be walking around afraid all the time. It's just that, like, you know, have a realistic understanding of the risks that are around us in society, and also the trends that are occurring. I think we all can look at like crime rates going up. So anyways, some of the things that you can do is, if you think about security in terms of control, it's one of the words that I used earlier, but like really what I'm looking to do is to control my environment and to control the situation. So I can create that control in the environment by allowing myself to understand someone's intent from a greater distance. So like in your situation that you mentioned with your house, so let's say you've got a fence at the edge of your property. And maybe in your situation, your fence doesn't go all the way around your house, and that's okay. At least you know that. But you know that, like, if you, let's say for a second that you enhance that fence and you put it around your whole property. Yeah. So probably you also know that, like, I could climb your fence, I can crawl under your fence, and I can probably cut through your fence. So sometimes you might feel like, oh, well, the fence doesn't really offer me anything that's valuable. However, here's the thing. If I'm a good person and I am welcome, or maybe I'm just going to knock on your door and ask you if you want to buy some Girl Scout cookies. So I'm probably going to go where the fence guides me. And so you can control access to your property more. And so you could see me walking up your walkway, and you can be like, oh, that person looks like they're here for, you know, a reasonable thing to knock on my door. That's okay. But if you saw me climbing your fence or you saw me cutting through your fence, you immediately know my intention from a greater distance. So the fence is an item that it's not about keeping people out. It may have a benefit of delaying me, but the greatest benefit that it provides you with is that you get to know my intent way before you would have. In other words, I bet you'd like to know that at the edge of your fence line. Versus right at your front door where you open the door and you're like, I don't know who you are. Right, yeah. Are you up to no good? Do you want to hurt me? Yeah.
Yeah. And we have, I mean, we have this property that has, I say this in all sincerity, we have a property that has one of the best pools in town. So we have a lot of parties and we have a lot of people here. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, it has been a thought, like, you know, we have a lot of parties, we have a lot of people here. People know who's, you know, about this pool. So I was actually very much looking forward to this conversation because it is something that we have to think about and consider. And I think it goes beyond locking our doors at night, right? Like, really kind of figuring that out because, I mean, you can kick a door in, right?
Yeah. Now, so think about it like this. So we talked for a minute about a fence, and now you just mentioned your door. So really what you're kind of drawing a picture, if you think about it, you're already drawing a theoretical picture that has like layers, sort of like an onion has, right? And in the security world, we call it either rings of security or layers of security. But the idea is like I mentioned, the understanding the intent of a person. Right. So if I know that security ultimately is about controlling my environment, I know it's about controlling the situation. I know that comes down to understanding the intent of an individual. If there's, you know, security is all about intentional harm. If someone accidentally hurts me, that's not security. But if somebody intentionally is trying to hurt me, now I have security involved in trying to stop that from happening.
So I'm going to interrupt
go
real quick. So you're actually talking about the difference between security and safety, right? Like
Correct.
if I'm driving around without my seatbelt on, that might not be very safe, but that's not a security issue. I'm not worried about someone trying to attack me.
That's right.
In fact, I might be more secure because I can jump out of the car faster without my seatbelt on.
And that's actually a good point, because there are certain situations from like a military perspective that you might be in a situation where you're in a vehicle and you choose for that particular situation not to put your seatbelt on, because the security situation in that environment may be such a great risk that the chance for the safety issue is actually reduced. And so now you're gonna balance that by.
Oh, did we lose Ariel?
It looks like it, but it was still a brilliant point that he was making.
Yeah.
We lost you for a second
about that.
there.
Yeah. We had an issue here with the cell. I'm on my phone because whatever.
It's okay. Because you need to be able to cut and run at any moment, right? Like
that's right, man. I can just grab my phone and go.
It wouldn't be as secure. You're like, I can run with my phone and I can be secure and still finish out the show. We appreciate it.
Man, I could be like, I could be running like this.
But Ariel, I just want to switch gears for a second from, personal home safety to like being safe out in the real world. I don't know if the world's getting more dangerous or it's getting safer. I can't tell. And the reason why I can't tell is because, back when and whenever when was, access to information wasn't as robust, right? Like there was no social media, there was no internet, things like that. So like crime, everything I have read is that the world is actually a slightly safer place because of that access to information, cameras, things like that. And that actually back in, like, for example, the 60s, 70s, the world was a much more dangerous place. We just didn't hear about it as much because news didn't travel as fast. Do you find that true, not true?
No, I think there's something to what you're saying. I think that, I'm reluctant to be a person out there waving a sign that says the world is going to end tomorrow. I think that there have been a lot of people like that all through history, and they've always been wrong. So with that said, I don't know that we're better off today than we were, a year ago. I think that there are problems within the environment. There's always problems in the world, right? But I think if you look, let's say people will talk about how kids playing video games is the reason that kids are more violent right now, and there's like school shootings, and they'll blame video games. I'm not sure that violent video games are a good thing for anybody's brain, but I also think that, like, I've been in the Middle East a lot. I spent a long time there. There are tribes of people who raise goats and have never seen a video game, and but they're very violent, very, very violent. And so, like, human beings, mammals can be violent creatures, and humans can be very violent creatures. Now, is the world a worse place today than it was in the 1500s? I'll bet not. I'll bet it's a much better and a much safer place today than it was in the 1500s. But at the same time, we also have, is it a more dangerous place in the United States, in your community today than it was 5 years ago? That may be the case too. It may be.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, I mean, I moved to Puerto Rico from Southern California. And when I moved to Southern California, it was incredibly safe. You didn't have to like lock your doors or anything like that in the area that I was in. I wasn't in LA or San Diego or anything like that. But the years leading up to me leaving, my car got broken into multiple times, and I lived in a relatively suburban rural area. And as a matter of fact, my car got broken into in my driveway, and I lived at the end of a cul-de-sac with only 4 houses in it on the edge of town that hit, it was a neighborhood, but we hit, farms. The minute you walked out of my neighborhood, you were like in farmland. So that was kind of, you know, scary. And our mailboxes were constantly being broken into and things like that. So, yeah, that made me kind of pause quite a bit before leaving. And I don't know, I feel like people almost feel entitled to take from others, whether it's life or property or, you know, sense of security, right? And that leads me to, like, you know, that's the United States, right? But let's talk about travel for a second. I recently had my 15-year-old son ask me if he could take a trip to Cuba by himself. And I said no. Was that the right answer?
I mean, I don't know your son, but every situation might be different, but I can't imagine, you know, allowing I think that a 15-year-old, generally speaking, doesn't necessarily have the life experience. And I think that, you know, when you get back to, let's put it this way, in my industry and in my experience, political correctness has no place. Because we're talking about life and death, and you find out real fast if your theories are accurate or not. And it doesn't matter if you like it. It doesn't matter if it feels good or not. It just is. And so generally speaking, a 15-year-old doesn't have the kind of life experience that it takes to travel almost anywhere on their own. Safely. I think that Cuba I've been to Cuba. I enjoyed it. But I feel more confident. I'll use the driving analogy again. Would you let him drive in any environment, anywhere in the world? Maybe not. He's 15. I don't even know if he's got a license yet. So if he doesn't have the ability to drive in Manhattan safely, then maybe he doesn't have the ability to travel internationally safely.
Right. No. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
So I want to circle to something a little bit different, because we brought this up briefly when we were talking to your wife, and we were talking mostly about the Global Action Institute that you guys created and how great that organization is. And I would recommend people go back and watch that episode, and we'll put it in the show notes as well. But
also, she's really cool.
So. She is really cool. Yeah, she's a great person, and I said this to her at the time too. I love both of you so much. I'm so happy to call you both friends. But so the thing is, like, on that episode, Jillian talked about the school that she works with, a small private school here in Puerto Rico, and about how there was a security situation at one of the local schools that overflew to where they came to realize that they really didn't have a good active shooter plan for her school. And I know this is something that you're well versed in. And to catch you up, you know, your wife's answer was like, yeah, you need to plan that. Like, but you know, for you, like, I mean, in that situation, if you're dealing with a small outdoor school, because that's the setting, right? Jillian's school, the kids literally, they're in like covered tents basically, but like open air environment outside. What should people do in those situations? Like what kinds of things, like, and I said this to you when I first met you, like, ever since seeing the Aurora, California, like shooting in the movie theater. When I go to a movie theater, I always make sure I'm like closer to the emergency exit. And also I know, like, I don't want to be in the front row, because like if I have to hide behind a movie seat when someone's shooting, I'd rather be behind the seat so they can't see me. Right. Like that's every time I go into a movie,
that's implanted in my brain. Now I'm going to that's
pay attention. But that is the first line of security, right? Like, I think the first line of security for me in any environment is to be aware of the environment I'm in and to have a plan of what I'm going to do should the stuff go sideways. Now, it's not about being paranoid. I don't sit in the movie theater like constantly watching the door and not enjoy the movie, because like the chance of a random shooter coming into a movie theater is actually very, very small in the US. It's actually very small everywhere in the world, right? Like, it's just not likely to occur. But at the same time, those people in that theater all died.
Yeah.
Right? I think one person survived. Like, and the person that survived was hiding in a 3/4 of the way back behind a seat. So where do I want to be? I want to be 3/4 of the way back so I can hide behind a seat where people aren't going to see me because it's dark. Like that's my first line of defense, in my opinion. Now, what about in those kinds of situations where you're outside of your home, you're outside of your business, and you're just out in the world and something goes wrong? What do you do?
All right. So whenever I think about these types of scenarios, my mind always goes back to principles. And the reason that I like to think through principles is because if you understand the principles, then any scenario you can paint, you just fit the principles in and it spits out an answer for you. So principally speaking, if you're under attack, there are two different kinds of responses that need to occur. There's a defensive response and there's an offensive response. It's just natural, right? Like a violent attacker is going to stop in one of two ways. Either he's going to decide to stop or somebody's going to stop him. If somebody stops him, that means that was an offensive response. They went toward the threat and they stopped him. So in your scenario, you're probably not looking at yourself as the offensive responder. And it's important, by the way, to know, like, am I going to run toward the threat or am I going to run away from the threat?
Sure. If I had a gun on my hip, I might feel different, right? But if someone's shooting at me and I don't have a gun, I'm probably going to run away.
I think that's probably a smart first reaction.
No, obviously there are differences, right? I think if I'm in a situation where someone's shooting into a crowd and they're right next to me and I could tackle them, maybe that is the right choice, right? Like, because I'm not going to be able to run away. I start running away, I'm going to get shot in the back, right?
That's right. That's right. So, but just generally speaking, understanding that, like, okay, if I'm in a bad situation like that, I know that there are only two answers. Either I'm going to respond offensively or I'm going to respond defensively. If I know already that, like, oh, I'm not the guy carrying a gun, I don't have the skills to respond offensively, and especially if I was in a situation where I'm, 15, 20, 30 feet away from the problem, so then the right answer is to probably respond defensively. Defensive means I have to either get myself away from the threat or I have to keep the threat from getting to me. And those are two, it sounds maybe like the same thing, but those are two different things. And what you said, hide behind in the dark behind the chair. So that really is doing something to keep the threat from getting to you. Running out the exit, like you said, you sit next to an exit, man, that means that you're aware that, like, the other possibility is get yourself away from the threat. So either evacuate, getting yourself away from the threat, or lock down, or take cover, that is keep the threat from getting to you. In both of those situations, you have to also be aware of, like, what's going on. Where is the guy? If I don't know where the guy is, which is possible inside of a movie theater or any kind of a scenario where you're indoors, it can be very confusing. So if you don't know where he is, then he's not here. So it's probably good to just lock down. Like, when I say lock down, I don't mean that you may, again, in a movie theater, let's say, maybe you can't lock a door. It doesn't mean that you don't get down low and hide and reassess the situation. That's a form of locking down. And then you might learn more information, like, oh, the guy's right over there. That means I'm going to go that way and run away. Make sense?
Yes.
So I feel like trying to simplify these things is really important, especially for any ordinary person who's not thinking about this on a regular basis. I tell my kids, it's just one of two things. Either ask yourself, is it more safe out there or is it more safe in here? If it's more safe out there, go out there. If it's more safe in here, stay here.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I guess these decisions are just things you have to make at the time. Like, you really don't, you can't plan every single possible scenario.
You can't.
So we do have to wrap up here in a second. So I want to, before we get too far, so tell us a little bit about the Draco group and Draco group is how you pronounce it, I think. And tell either way, whatever you think, just tell us about that, like what you do, like what people should be reaching out to you and why, that kind of stuff.
All right. Well, I mean, ultimately, we do a lot of different things. I always joke, people ask me that, I say we solve problems. Specifically security related problems, but our our clientele are often ultra high net worth families. We build out high level, kind of like an artistic security program for their entire life, their homes, their lives, their boats, their, whatever it is that they have and need and want to be able to move. We build out security programs like that also for big corporations. We work as consultants. So like we come in and help people to answer those questions through that principle-based system. And, normally we're not the check the box kind of people. We're more like building an artistic security lifestyle.
I think that's excellent. Jillian, do you have any more questions before we wrap up here? We can't hear you. I think you're muted, actually. So
yeah, actually, I do have a question. I'm wondering where the name Draco Group came from, because all I ever think about when I think of Draco, I think of Draco Malfoy from Harry Potter.
Harry Potter, yeah, sure.
I went totally Rocky IV on that, actually.
Oh, all right, good one.
So it's neither of those. Actually, it was. So, I spent a lot of time in the Israeli military. I'm Jewish. I started the company when I was overseas, and I've worked in a lot of places in the world where it wasn't necessarily friendly for somebody like me to be working. When I started the company, it was kind of in the forefront of my mind that I wanted something that was not an overtly Israeli or Jewish word, that we could work anywhere in the world, that it's a word that can be said in any language and pronounced properly in any language. It looks good written.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's got hard consonants, and it's short and simple, and it has a strong meaning. So
wow. That's awesome. Oh, I love that. That's a great
So
story.
we need to hire him for branding in the future too.
I know, right?
No, we already knew you were an expert at
the
security, but I didn't know that you had this other talent. So fantastic stuff. Okay, you know what? So great having you on. I actually would love to continue the conversation in the future, as always, and I can't wait to see you again and tell your lovely wife I said hello. And with that, Jillian, would you like to take us out?
Yes, thank you so much, Ariel. We'll be right back.
Appreciate it.
Go! I told you he was amazing.
Jeff, I am not secure. I'm just going to throw it out
there.
Oh,
I know that. But I mean, you do have these levels of security, right? First, to get to your place, you have to go up a really steep hill. That's the first line of security. That's like that might be the most secure part about it. Like the part of your house without a fence, like it's hard to climb that hill. Like that's difficult. It's a physical barrier, right?
Right.
So I know that you're more secure than you think. Plus you have locks on your door. Plus you have dogs. Mm-hmm. Plus you can always throw a kid or two at whatever's coming and hope it works out.
I think I'll forego that last one.
That seems like a good strategy, actually. Yeah. But yeah, no, I mean, listen, security is one of those things that we don't think about until we need it. And that's why I thought it was a really good idea to bring Ariel on today, because I think it's something that every one of our audience members needs to think about occasionally. Like, I know it sounds facetious when I say I like pick my seat in the movie theater for security reasons, but I literally have done that for 15 or 20 years now. And I go to the movies 2 or 3 times a week for years. I haven't since COVID, I'd go way less. But I really do think that way, because I'm like, I don't really want to die. And it takes me 2 seconds to make that decision. And 2 seconds is nothing. Like, I'm going to be sitting there in the dark anyway. Why not sit in the dark in a slightly more secure place?
Yeah.
And that's how I look at security in general. And that's why I wanted to have Ariel on. And that's why I'm going to keep making him come back until we're all much more secure. So hopefully.
Well, no, I actually thought it was he was a great guest, because it is something that on this podcast you normally wouldn't hear about, but it is like, if we're trying to live the best versions of our last life ever, we should be definitely living them more securely, right?
That's exactly how I feel about
those things. Yeah, because I take unreasonable risks sometimes, and I will say this: the older I get, the less risks I take.
Which is ironic because actually the older we get, we have less to lose, right? Because like we have less potential future life, but we also become wiser from our life experience. So like and you know, we have to wrap up again. Like we're always going long now, but like from my perspective, I think it's all about mitigating risk. I think this is the secret to life in general. Like look at the situation you're in and figure out what reasonable steps you can do to mitigate the risk of security threats, the risk of health threats, the risk of safety issues, the risk of bad investment decisions. You know, all of this stuff. It's all about looking at the total picture and saying like, how do I get what I want, which is a safe, happy, secure, like best version of my life with the least amount of risk that something disrupts that? And this is just one element of it. We got to reduce the risk.
Absolutely. Well, Jeff, as always, it's been a pleasure.
It has been a pleasure. And I want to let everyone know I'm really happy that they're watching their 74th hour in a row of the show because they've been binge watching since the beginning of time. And I just thought I'd share that with you since
you have to watch. Now you have to watch all 74 hours to get that inside joke.
Yes, because it was peppered throughout. It's hidden in one of our previous episodes. Yes. And if you're still listening, I want to remind you to live the very best version of your last life ever.